Have you ever wondered why some people can walk away from almost anyone, yet never truly let go of one specific person? Why they disappear without warning, avoid difficult conversations, act emotionally distant, and still carry someone's presence in their mind for years? It seems impossible. If they fear closeness, why would they stay emotionally connected to anyone at all? And if they are so independent, why does one person become unforgettable while everyone else slowly fades away? The answer isn't what most people think. It has very little to do with love alone. It has everything to do with psychology, emotional safety, and the deepest parts of human nature that most people never learn to recognize. Stay with this video until the very end, because you'll discover why avoidant people form a lifelong bond with one specific type of person, how this connection changes the way they think and feel, and, more importantly, what this teaches about becoming the kind of person who leaves a lasting impact on others without chasing, forcing, or losing yourself. Most people misunderstand avoidant personalities. They assume someone who pulls away simply doesn't care. They believe distance means a lack of emotion. They think silence is proof that the connection was never real. But human psychology tells a very different story. The people who hide their emotions the most are not always the people who feel the least. Sometimes they feel so deeply that distance becomes the only strategy they know to protect themselves. They learned, often without realizing it, that depending on someone is risky. Opening their heart feels dangerous. Trust feels uncertain. Vulnerability feels like standing in the middle of a storm without shelter. So they build walls, not because they enjoy loneliness, but because those walls once helped them survive. Think about that for a moment. Every person carries invisible experiences that shape the way they connect with others. Some people learned that love is safe. Others learned that love disappears. Some discovered that expressing emotions brings comfort. Others discovered that expressing emotions leads to disappointment, rejection, or pain. Over time, the brain adapts. It creates patterns. It searches for ways to avoid future hurt. What begins as protection slowly becomes personality. What begins as survival slowly becomes identity. Before they even notice it, avoiding emotional closeness starts to feel normal. This is where many people make a life-changing mistake. They believe the answer is to chase harder. They send more messages. They explain themselves again and again. They try to prove their worth. They think if they love enough, sacrifice enough, or wait long enough, the other person will finally stop running. But the harder they chase, the faster the avoidant mind often retreats. Not because the love is unwanted, but because pressure awakens fear, and fear always searches for escape. There is an important lesson hidden inside this. Human beings are not moved by force. They are moved by emotional experience. You cannot convince someone to feel safe by demanding closeness. You cannot build trust by removing another person's freedom. Lasting connection is never created through control. It is created through consistency, patience, understanding, and emotional security. These qualities speak directly to the human nervous system. They communicate something words alone never can. You are safe here. This idea reaches far beyond relationships. It reflects the way we live our entire lives. Think about your biggest dreams. The more desperately you chase external approval, the more exhausted you become. The more you depend on validation, the weaker your confidence grows. Real strength begins the moment you stop trying to force outcomes and start becoming someone whose presence naturally creates trust. That shift changes everything. People are drawn to peace more than pressure. They remember how you made them feel long after they forget the exact words you said. Now imagine someone who has spent years believing closeness always leads to pain. They meet hundreds of people, conversations come and go, relationships begin and end, faces become memories, yet one person quietly stands apart from everyone else. Not because they were perfect, not because they played games, not because they chased harder than anyone else. They stood apart because they created something incredibly rare. They made emotional safety feel real. They respected boundaries without becoming distant. They showed care without trying to control. They remained genuine without pretending to be someone else. To an avoidant mind, this experience feels unfamiliar. And what is unfamiliar often becomes unforgettable. This is why appearances can be so misleading. Someone may seem cold on the outside while carrying a connection that never completely leaves them. They may continue living their life, building routines, achieving goals, and appearing unaffected. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, one relationship quietly reshapes the way they understand trust. They may never say it out loud. They may never fully express it. But deep inside, the experience remains. Human psychology is fascinating because the strongest emotional bonds are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes the deepest connections exist in silence. Here's something worth remembering. Every person wants to feel accepted. Every person wants to believe they can be seen without being judged. Even those who avoid closeness carry that desire. The difference is that fear often speaks louder than hope. Fear whispers that opening up will end in disappointment. Fear predicts abandonment before it happens. Fear convinces people to leave first so they won't have to experience being left behind. Yet beneath all of those protective habits is the same human heart, searching for peace, belonging, and genuine understanding. That is why this conversation is not just about avoidant people. It is about you. It is about the kind of energy you bring into every relationship, every friendship, every conversation, and even your relationship with yourself. The greatest influence you will ever have does not come from trying to become unforgettable. It comes from becoming emotionally grounded. When your confidence no longer depends on chasing others, your presence changes. When your peace no longer depends on someone else's approval, your relationships change. And when your value comes from within instead of constant reassurance, you begin attracting healthier connections naturally. As this journey continues, you'll discover the surprising psychological reason one specific person can remain in an avoidant individual's heart for years, why this bond is so different from ordinary attraction, and, most importantly, what this reveals about becoming a person whose strength comes from authenticity instead of desperation. The answers may challenge everything you've believed about love, distance, and lasting connection, but they may also change the way you see yourself forever. If that idea feels surprising, it is because most people have been taught to judge behavior only by what they can see. They notice the silence, they notice the distance, they notice the lack of communication. Then they assume they understand the whole story. But the human mind is far more complex than visible actions. What happens beneath the surface often carries much greater weight than what appears on the outside. An avoidant person usually spends years mastering one skill above all others: emotional self-protection. It becomes automatic. The moment a relationship starts feeling too important, an internal alarm quietly switches on. That alarm is not asking, "Is this person right for me?" Instead, it asks, "What if I lose myself? What if I get hurt? What if this ends the way painful experiences ended before?" Those questions can become so powerful that they influence every decision without the person even realizing it. This is why someone with an avoidant attachment style can genuinely care for another person while acting in ways that seem confusing. Their actions are often driven by fear rather than a lack of feeling. To an outside observer, it may appear that they are unaffected. Inside, however, there is often an invisible conflict between the desire for connection and the instinct to remain emotionally guarded. That internal battle can continue for months or even years. Now comes the question that changes everything. Who is the one person they struggle to forget? It is rarely the loudest person in the room. It is not necessarily the most attractive. It is not the person who constantly demands attention or tries to prove their value. The unforgettable person is usually someone who creates a completely different emotional experience. This individual does something unusual. They do not panic when space is needed. They do not react to every moment of uncertainty with fear. They understand the difference between patience and weakness. They know that self-respect is more powerful than emotional chasing. Instead of making the relationship feel like a battlefield, they make it feel steady. Psychology teaches us that the brain remembers emotional contrast. When someone expects criticism but receives understanding, the experience becomes memorable. When someone expects pressure but finds acceptance instead, the mind pays attention. When someone expects manipulation but encounters honesty, old beliefs begin to crack. These moments leave a deeper impression than dramatic words ever could. That is why emotional safety is so rare. Many people believe trust is built through grand promises. In reality, trust grows through repeated experiences. Every calm response during conflict, every honest conversation, every moment of consistency, every action that matches the words spoken, the brain quietly records these patterns. Over time, they become evidence that a different kind of relationship might actually exist. For an avoidant person, this evidence can be life-changing. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack for years without realizing how much it weighs. You have become so used to the burden that it feels normal. Then one day, someone helps remove part of that weight. Suddenly, you notice how exhausting the journey had always been. That is similar to what happens when an emotionally guarded person meets someone who does not increase their anxiety, but instead brings a sense of calm. This does not mean every relationship becomes easy. Challenges still exist. Misunderstandings still happen. Growth still requires effort from both people. But one important difference appears. Instead of feeling trapped, they begin to experience freedom within the connection. And freedom is something the avoidant mind values deeply. Many people accidentally create the opposite effect. They believe love means constant checking, endless reassurance, and complete access to another person's time and attention. While those actions may come from good intentions, they can sometimes overwhelm someone whose nervous system already associates closeness with emotional danger. The result is predictable. The more crowded they feel, the stronger the urge becomes to create distance. This pattern teaches an important lesson that applies to every area of life. Strength is not measured by how tightly you hold on. It is measured by your ability to remain secure even when circumstances feel uncertain. People who know their worth do not spend every moment trying to convince others to stay. They invest in becoming the best version of themselves. Ironically, this quiet confidence often becomes far more attractive than endless pursuit. Another fascinating principle from psychology explains why certain memories remain vivid for years. The human brain gives special importance to experiences that challenge deeply held beliefs. If someone has spent most of their life believing that emotional closeness always leads to disappointment, meeting a person who consistently proves otherwise creates a powerful mental conflict. The old belief says, nobody is truly safe. The new experience whispers, maybe this time is different. That conflict does not disappear overnight. Even after the relationship changes or life takes both people in different directions, the emotional impact often remains. Not because the avoidant person enjoys living in the past, but because their mind continues trying to understand an experience that does not fit the familiar pattern. It becomes a reference point, a reminder that another way of connecting may actually be possible. This is why the person they remember is often someone who inspired growth rather than dependency. Someone who encouraged honesty instead of pretending, someone who respected themselves enough to avoid unhealthy games, someone whose actions reflected emotional maturity instead of emotional chaos. Notice something important here. None of these qualities require perfection. People often believe they must become flawless before they deserve meaningful relationships. That belief creates unnecessary pressure. Human beings do not connect because someone is perfect. They connect because someone is genuine. Authenticity creates comfort. Integrity creates confidence. Emotional stability creates trust. These qualities cannot be faked for long because they grow from inner character rather than outward performance. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding is believing that making someone stay should be the ultimate goal. It should not. The real goal is becoming a person whose life is guided by purpose, balance, and self-respect. When that happens, every relationship becomes healthier because it is no longer driven by fear of losing someone. Instead, it is built on mutual choice. And this leads to one final realization before moving forward. The specific person an avoidant never truly forgets is not simply someone they loved. It is someone who quietly changed the way they experience connection itself. Someone who made trust feel possible without demanding it. Someone whose presence became associated with peace instead of pressure. Those experiences leave marks that time alone cannot erase. Understanding this principle opens the door to an even deeper truth. The lasting bond is only the beginning. The real mystery is why some avoidant individuals still struggle to return, even when that unforgettable connection continues to live in their heart. That answer reveals one of the strongest psychological forces shaping human behavior, and it changes the entire meaning of love, fear, and emotional freedom. That brings us to the question that leaves so many people confused. If an avoidant person carries such a meaningful connection inside, why don't they simply come back? Why doesn't remembering automatically lead to rebuilding the relationship? At first, this seems like a contradiction, but once you understand how the human mind responds to fear, the answer becomes much clearer. Memory and action are not the same thing. A person can miss an opportunity and still never reach for it. Someone can value another human being while remaining frozen by doubt. This happens every day in different areas of life. People delay chasing their dreams because they fear failure. They avoid difficult conversations because they fear rejection. They stay inside familiar routines because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. The heart may want one direction, while the mind keeps pulling toward another. That silent struggle shapes countless decisions. For an avoidant individual, emotional risk often feels larger than emotional reward. Their brain has spent years treating closeness as something that must be managed carefully. Even when they recognize someone extraordinary, old habits do not disappear overnight. The nervous system always prefers what feels familiar, even when the familiar no longer serves us. Think about how powerful habits become. A person who has lived in darkness for a long time does not immediately feel comfortable in bright light. At first, the light itself feels overwhelming, yet the light is not the problem. The eyes simply need time to adjust. Emotional growth follows the same pattern. Healthy relationships may initially feel unfamiliar because they challenge years of deeply rooted expectations. This explains why lasting change is never created by pressure. It begins with awareness. Every breakthrough starts when a person recognizes that the strategies protecting them yesterday may be limiting them today. Until that realization happens, the cycle often repeats itself. Distance creates loneliness. Loneliness creates longing. Longing creates fear. Fear creates more distance. Without self-awareness, the pattern keeps turning like a wheel. There is another psychological truth that deserves attention. Human beings naturally protect the identity they have built over time. If someone has quietly told themselves for years, "I am better off relying only on myself," every close relationship challenges that identity. The question is no longer whether another person can be trusted. The deeper question becomes, can I allow myself to become someone different? That question is far more difficult to answer. Real transformation asks people to release familiar beliefs that once made them feel secure. This is true for everyone, not only those with avoidant tendencies. Every person carries invisible stories about who they are, what they deserve, and what they should expect from life. Those stories quietly influence choices every single day. This is why the unforgettable person becomes so important. They do not simply create beautiful memories. They introduce a new possibility. They become living evidence that another way of connecting exists. Even if the avoidant person steps away, the experience remains. Deep inside, a comparison begins. Future relationships are measured against the emotional safety they once encountered. Future conversations are unconsciously compared with the honesty they once experienced. Without realizing it, the standard has changed. That is the hidden reason such connections are difficult to replace. People often believe unforgettable relationships are built through intensity. In reality, they are usually built through emotional consistency. Dramatic highs and painful lows may create excitement, but they rarely create lasting peace. The human nervous system eventually becomes exhausted by constant instability. What it truly longs for is reliability. It seeks someone whose actions remain steady when circumstances become difficult. This principle extends far beyond romance. Think about the people who have changed your own life. Chances are they were not the loudest voices. They were the ones who believed in you when your confidence disappeared. They stayed honest when lying would have been easier. They remained calm during moments of uncertainty. Their influence came from their character, not from temporary emotion. That is exactly why personal growth must always come before trying to change someone else. Many people spend years asking, how do I make another person realize my value? A better question is, how do I become someone whose value is no longer dependent on another person's recognition? That single shift changes everything. Confidence built from within cannot be taken away by silence, rejection, or temporary distance. It becomes part of your identity. When your life is guided by purpose instead of constant validation, something remarkable happens. You stop living from fear. You stop measuring your worth through another person's behavior. You stop sacrificing your peace just to keep someone close. Instead, you begin attracting healthier experiences because your decisions come from strength rather than insecurity. Human psychology repeatedly confirms an important principle. People are influenced more by who you become than by what you repeatedly say. Your energy changes when you develop emotional stability. Your decisions become wiser. Your boundaries become healthier. Your relationships become more balanced because they are no longer driven by desperation. This does not mean becoming emotionally distant yourself. It means learning the difference between attachment and inner security. Attachment says, I need someone else to complete me. Inner security says, I can deeply care for someone while still remaining whole. That distinction is life-changing. One creates dependence, the other creates freedom. Ironically, the people who leave the strongest impression are often those who never abandon themselves in order to keep another person. They continue growing. They continue learning. They continue building meaningful lives. Their happiness is not borrowed from someone else's approval. It comes from living according to their values. That kind of person becomes unforgettable because they awaken something powerful inside others. They remind people that healthy love is not built on fear, emotional games, or endless pursuit. It is built on respect, honesty, patience, and mutual growth. Those qualities inspire change far more effectively than control ever could. So if you have ever questioned your own worth because someone pulled away, remember this. Another person's fear is not a measure of your value. Their hesitation does not define your future. Their internal struggles belong to their own journey. Your responsibility is different. Your responsibility is to become stronger, wiser, calmer, and more authentic than you were yesterday. Because the greatest victory is never convincing someone to stay. The greatest victory is becoming the kind of person who never has to betray themselves in order to be loved. And when that transformation happens, something extraordinary begins. You stop chasing connection and you start creating it naturally. That is the moment your entire life changes, regardless of who chooses to walk beside you. Everything leads to one final realization. This conversation was never meant to teach you how to make another human being stay attached forever. That kind of goal comes from fear, not wisdom. The deeper lesson is far more valuable. It is about understanding what creates a connection that remains meaningful long after time, distance, or changing circumstances separate two lives. That lesson has the power to transform every relationship you will ever have, beginning with the one you have with yourself. The greatest influence is never created by trying to become unforgettable. It happens naturally when your actions consistently reflect honesty, emotional balance, and genuine character. Human beings may forget words. They may even forget specific moments, but they rarely forget how someone made them feel during the chapters of life that mattered the most. Emotional experiences leave marks that logic alone cannot erase. That is why real impact is built from daily choices rather than dramatic gestures. Many people spend years searching for the perfect technique to win someone's attention. They believe there is a secret message, a hidden strategy, or a psychological trick that will unlock another person's heart. But the strongest relationships are not built through manipulation. They grow from authenticity. People may respond to clever tactics for a short time, but lasting trust cannot survive where honesty is missing. Eventually, every mask becomes too heavy to carry. Think about the strongest trees in a forest. Their strength does not come from reaching high into the sky alone. It comes from the roots hidden beneath the ground. Those roots grow quietly, long before anyone notices the branches. Human character develops in the same way. Your habits, your values, your discipline, and your integrity become the unseen foundation supporting every meaningful connection in your life. Without that foundation, even the most exciting beginning eventually becomes unstable. This is why your greatest investment should always be your own growth. Learn to manage your emotions instead of allowing your emotions to manage you. Learn to communicate with honesty instead of reacting through impulse. Learn to face uncomfortable truths instead of escaping from them. Every small improvement strengthens the person you become tomorrow. These changes may seem invisible at first, but over time they reshape your entire life. Psychology teaches us that people naturally move toward environments where they feel respected, understood, and emotionally secure. This principle applies in friendships, families, workplaces, and romantic relationships. Everyone wants to feel accepted without pretending to be someone they are not. When you become the kind of person who offers respect without losing self-respect, something remarkable happens. Your relationships stop revolving around fear of loss and begin revolving around mutual appreciation. That shift is incredibly powerful. Instead of asking, "How do I stop someone from leaving?" your thinking changes to, "How do I continue becoming someone who lives with purpose, regardless of who comes or goes?" This question removes enormous pressure from your shoulders. It reminds you that your future is never controlled by another person's decisions. Your future is shaped by your own daily actions, your mindset, and your willingness to keep growing through every experience life brings. Every relationship teaches something. Some teach joy, others teach patience, some reveal hidden strengths, others expose wounds that still need healing. Even painful endings can become valuable if they encourage self-awareness instead of bitterness. The people who rise after disappointment are not necessarily stronger from the beginning. They simply choose to learn instead of remaining trapped inside resentment. That decision changes everything. Imagine carrying every difficult experience as proof that you are unworthy. Life would become heavier with every passing year. Now imagine carrying those same experiences as lessons that sharpen your wisdom, deepen your compassion, and strengthen your resilience. The events remain the same, but their meaning becomes completely different. That is one of the greatest powers every human being possesses. You cannot always control what happens to you, but you can decide what it will teach you. This is where true confidence is born. Confidence is not believing that everyone will choose you. Confidence is knowing you will remain true to your values even if they do not. Confidence is trusting yourself enough to walk away from situations that destroy your peace. Confidence is refusing to measure your worth by another person's ability to recognize it. Once you reach that place, you stop living in constant emotional uncertainty. You begin creating a life that feels meaningful from the inside out. Ironically, this is also the mindset that leaves the deepest impression on others. People remember those who remained kind without becoming weak. They remember those who stayed honest without becoming cruel. They remember those who protected their dignity without trying to control anyone else. These qualities inspire admiration because they reflect inner stability rather than emotional dependence. If an avoidant person truly carries someone in their heart for years, it is rarely because that individual begged them to stay. It is because they represented something unforgettable. They showed that genuine connection could exist without manipulation. They demonstrated that care does not require ownership. They proved that respect can exist alongside independence. Those experiences quietly challenge old beliefs in ways that time cannot easily erase. There is a lesson here that extends far beyond attachment styles. Every human being becomes part of another person's story. The question is not whether you will leave an impression. The real question is what kind of impression you will leave. Will people remember fear, confusion, and emotional chaos? Or will they remember calmness, honesty, courage, and authenticity? The answer is written through your daily choices, not your occasional promises. As you continue moving through life, remember this above everything else. Never lose yourself while trying to keep someone else. Never sacrifice your values for temporary approval. Never believe that your happiness depends on another person's ability to stay close. The strongest relationships are built between two complete individuals who freely choose one another, not between two people desperately trying to fill each other's emptiness. Your greatest power has always been the person you are becoming. Keep building your character. Keep protecting your peace. Keep choosing growth over comfort, wisdom over impulse, and truth over illusion. Because when you become emotionally grounded, your presence naturally carries weight. You no longer need to force connection, demand attention, or chase acceptance. You simply become the kind of person whose influence continues long after the conversation ends. And perhaps that is the most important truth of all. The connections that endure are never created by fear of losing someone. They are created by becoming someone whose integrity, compassion, and quiet strength remain unforgettable. That is the bond that lasts. That is the legacy that matters. And that is the path toward a life defined not by who stayed or who left, but by the person you chose to become.